Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, our regular gathering here of our plucky and proud patriotic Hopium subscribers. Grateful for all of you being here. This is the first gathering since the passage of the Big Ugly, as I call it. And so we're in a transition period now. We're entering a new period in our domestic discourse. And so I'm going to try to do my best to give you my sense of the currents and what's happening and some thoughts about what we can do together over the rest of the summer and going into the fall. Um, Number one is that I think that and I don't think we actually say this enough, that Trump is really sort of exploring this role that he's cast for himself as the most powerful man in the world, as this incredible, he has these dictatorial fantasies, this mad king kind of approach to everything, where he believes that he is in his own fantasy. He believes that he is young and strong and virile, and that the world is bending their knee to him, and that he's popular and admired, and that this fantasy that he has about himself and about American power, this sort of kind of cartoonish understanding of American power, is really sort of the driving thing in our politics today, right? That he is exploring the limits of what he can get away with. He's watching the courts, the Supreme Court and his Republican allies in Congress sort of bend the knee, and he's expecting everybody else to do it too. But the other part of that story is that the American people and the leaders of the world, the countries of the world, most of the courts here in the US are not bending the knee. They're not playing ball with this sort of ridiculous invention of this young, virile, powerful man named Donald Trump. And this tension between his wanting to live in a understanding of himself as being having unchecked global power and the reality that he doesn't have that, and that the country is that he's losing the country, and that he's continually being rebuffed by reality, by people, by leaders of the world, is this incredible tension in our politics now. And I'll give you an example of this. And I think it really sort of started really kind of banging into each other a few weeks ago when Elon Musk had his great break with Trump. And as you've heard me say, I think this caused Trump's psychic injury. I think he was injured by this and that he couldn't understand it because the wealthiest man in the world was his buddy and it was trailing him around and, treating him like he was an important guy. And then he broke with him and he attacked him for 3 days on Twitter. And I think that a lot of what's happened since has been Trump desperately trying to reassert this sense of him being powerful and strong and successful in winning. As we've discussed here, Trump really sees the world in this kind of very simple way. And Anne Applebaum talked about this when she came to visit us a few weeks ago, that he sees the world as strong and weak, winning and losing, success and failure. That's sort of his whole thing. And he wants to be winning and strong and powerful, strong with all caps, by the way, right? And winning at all times. And the reality is that Musk really hurt this image. He penetrated because Musk was heard in MAGA world, right? Musk was able to break through the information bubble into MAGA world. And look what's happened since, right? Within a couple days of that happening, Trump started his dramatic immigration escalation in Los Angeles, bringing in the Marines, and in order to reestablish his strength and his manhood. And the country rejected this. They didn't rally behind him. These actions became very negative, and his poll numbers went down. After having, by the way, he had had weeks of sort of recovery in his poll numbers after the Liberation Day tariffs. He had actually had a few weeks where he was coming back to a place where he was almost in an okay place polling wise after having really tanked after the Liberation Day in early April. And then he had his sad birthday parade that nobody came to. And on that same day, millions of us marched and protested and rallied all across the country. And that day of narcissistic need to celebrate his strength was denied him in the media because of all of us and all the work that we did. And then he bombed Iran. And he also believed, as you know, because it's the way he sees the world, that the country was going to rally behind him. And this was this grand strategy that he should get the Nobel Prize for. And he's done things that nobody's ever done before. And the country again turned on him. And they rejected this. This was one of the first major military actions, potentially in all of recent American history, that was not immediately popular. And he was underwater on this, and his poll numbers went down again. And then we had the big ugly bill, the big ugly, as I call it, which was incredibly unpopular, which he had tried to sell to the public and had lost that effort for months and months. It passed last week, this incredibly damaging, terrible legislation that's going to do so much harm to the country. And we've gotten two polls this week. We've only gotten two. I'm a little surprised, but both of them show his numbers going down after signing this. So he's tried these spectaculars, these things to fundamentally change and reestablish his strength and his power and his standing with the public, right? Because even, he knows, I mean, he's getting his own polling that is different from all the right-wing polling that's showing him popular and strong and virile. And they know he's not where he wants to be. The independent polling is not good for him. And as I've shown you in my own writing, he's taken huge hits with young people and Hispanics and independents, which were the groups that helped put him over the top in the last election. His 2024 coalition is unraveled. And the thing is, this is a source of strength in Washington. Poll numbers, sense of whether you're succeeding or failing. And part of the reason I have come to believe that his coalition has remained loyal to him is that there has been this increase this year of these right-wing polls showing him at 55-45, popular and strong and winning. And that's what they're seeing. On their side in the information bubble, they think he's succeeding and he's winning and the country likes him. But in the real world, right? In the world of where the sky is blue and it's not red and where reality, prevails, he is not popular and he's losing the public and things that he's doing that should have gotten him in better shape with the public are not working. And this is a serious problem. I mean, Stuart Stevens, I was on with Stuart Stevens a few months ago and on his at Lincoln Square, and he talked about how with Bush, once Katrina happened, it was like basically the country had kind of given up on Bush after that. And there was nothing they could do. There was no spectacular, there was no strategy. And Trump is now trying all these spectacular things, bombing another nation, right? Passing this massive bill. He's, invading, sending the Marines into Los Angeles. And all of this isn't working because he is not strong. He is weak. He is a loser. He's not a winner. He isn't succeeding. He's actually failing. He is a big blubbery baby man and not a strong man. And that's the reality that we have to hold to. And we can't allow his madness and the madness of the right-wing noise machine to become our own madness. And what's important for everyone to realize here, and this is the thing I talk about a lot, is that the fact that that bill went so negative, the most unpopular major piece of legislation in modern American history, was an incredible sign of them losing their connection to the public and whatever hold he had. Despite, by the way, all the obeyant legacy media, the vast right-wing noise machine, his daily press conferences and everything else, they're so much louder than we are every day. They're not able to restore his standing, and they weren't able to get the public behind this bill. And so this is weakness and not strength. This is losing, this is not winning. This is failing, not succeeding. And it's really important that we understand that because I think that this tension between his need to be successful and the reality that he isn't is going to cause him, as I've been writing this week, to look for ever more spectacular things to do, to to assert his power and restore his manhood while it is being denied him, right, by reality and by all of us, right, in our unwillingness to go along with these fictions that he weaves every day. this rancid reality TV show that we all are subject to every day. And so what's happened this week is you've seen this, right? You've seen him go wild on the tariffs. He's gone crazier on the tariffs in the last few days than at any point in this mad exercise of power, these unconstitutional, illegal tariffs that he has no authority to be levying on foreign countries, that he's just usurping and asserting his power. Congress is going along. The Supreme Court, slowed down the ability of lower courts to block this stuff. And he's been given this space to do this by his political allies. And I think now he has looked in the last few days, particularly with these letters that he sent to foreign leaders and his crazy his capital letters and his wild Trump speech that weren't written in diplomatic language. And then also the letter that he sent to Brazil tonight, which we're just getting news about, which is one of the most batshit crazy things that he's done. He looks like an out of control, crazy madman over the last few days about stuff that really matters. I mean, how the global economy operates, how American businesses are going to operate abroad, how, whether he's torching our alliances and our economic relationships and our ability to navigate as a country. These are grave and serious matters. And I think that the Washington Republicans are going to start getting a little bit nervous given how crazy this is. He said 90 deals in 90 days. He didn't deliver a single deal. Failure, not success. Weakness, not strength, right? He is not what he believes himself to be. And so he's looking for these greater spectaculars. They started on Monday. They also did this insane raid through the soccer field in this park where there were campers in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, looking, again to sort of reassert this strength and this manhood. And yet we all realize that on some levels this feels ridiculous and like a really silly cartoon, like we're watching Monty Python or, some kind of Benny Hill or some kind of show where this is like Yes Minister, if you remember that show on PBS, the English show. This feels comical and ridiculous on some levels. And yes, there's a part of this that is terrifying and he's out of control and he's got nuclear weapons and he's got this supercharged ice. But there's also a piece of this that is absurd and ridiculous. And we can't lose that sense of absurdity because, again, a majority of the country is not buying into this. This is critical to understand. 40% of the country is going to buy into this no matter what. His floor is probably 40%, 38%. It's the 60% that we're operating in that we have to communicate with. And I think that he's had a really bad week. I think that he thought he was going to have a victory lap from this incredible bill that he just signed. And he's got the Epstein files, that have come, roaring out. He's had, he's now being his bill, the bill that just passed. What happens now in Washington is that there still has to be an annual budget. This was a reconciliation bill. There still has to be a budget for the whole government of which this stuff's going to get included into. And that but new budget year, the fiscal year 26 starts on October 1st. And they are struggling to get this thing together. This thing is going to be an unbelievable mess. And it's also going to be an incredible opportunity for us to revisit some of these things that they've done to engage them in a public debate, because they're going to have to take these cuts to NOAA and to FAA and all the things, all the ways they've sort of USAID, all these things they've done that are causing unbelievable damage to the American people, the cuts at NIH, the cuts at HHS. They have to put this into a budget and vote on it. And so this isn't become something any longer that Trump is doing. Congress is going to now have to own all this stuff. And I think for me, part of the opportunity that we have in the coming months is the general view here at Hopium is that we have to both work to mitigate the damage he's doing, but also to build for electoral and political success as we go forward. Is that, that I think that part of what we have this opportunity, let me just look at my notes here because this is a new talk I'm giving tonight, is that I think that we are going to be able to engage him and the Republican Party in the coming months about what they're doing to the country. I think that part of the opportunity we have now is the Washington Democrats have been very disciplined about staying focused on the big ugly. And we collectively, through town hall meetings, through teletown halls, through all the things that we've done together, the phone calls to Congress, the protests, We drove the numbers down on that bill. That was a huge achievement in the information wars that we're in. And it should give us confidence that if we continue to engage them, that we can have other victories. And I think the combination of the bill of their budget now having to be debated and passed over the next few months, institutionalizing some of these unbelievably dangerous and destructive things they're going to do, gives Congress and all of us opportunities, right? I also think what's going to happen in the states is places where Democrats control the governments is that we can start having hearings now about all the things that are happening, all of his agenda, and that where we have this opportunity now is not just to focus on the bill, it's to take the bill and put it into his broader agenda. This agenda that I call an agenda of sabotage, plunder, or betrayal, an agenda that's making us poorer, weaker, less safe, and less free. That we're not going to just be talking about the big ugly anymore. We're now going to be talking about all of it. And I think this gives us opportunities to be creative, to engage him. I think our state Democratic leaders should be planning hearings for the fall about whatever aspects of the budget and the things that are coming down to the states, because part of what's happening is the federal government is essentially telling the American people there's all these things they're just not going to do anymore. They're not going to do disaster relief. They're not going to send warning. We're not going to have a National Weather Service anymore. We're not going to have an FAA that's making sure that planes don't fall out of the sky. We're not going to take care of poor people who can't, and seniors and old age homes. Trump and the Republicans are doing the equivalent of retreating back to their gated communities and saying, fuck you all, like you're all on your own. And, it's what they did with USAID. It's what they're doing with the cuts in Medicaid. It's what their approach to the country is fuck you all, right? Like literally, it's fuck you all. It is an unbelievable betrayal of everything that he campaigned on, the promises that he made to lower costs and to take care of working people. This is the most hostile agenda for working people that one could possibly imagine. And I think that we should feel confident now that we have to design opportunities in our home communities to use our elected leaders to cause and force debate. One of the ways we're doing it is in this project that we have called the Resolutions Project, which was debated in the Boston City Council today. Congratulations, Rachel, who's been working on this, where our friend Dr. Deborah Potter, we now have these resolutions moving in 42 different places in 14 states, 42 different sets of resolutions are moving. We can be creative about engaging them now and forcing them to defend what they did. Today in Boston, for example, the resolution got tabled, but there was a debate and a discussion about Trump's abandonment of the constitutional order. We have more power than we understand. This has been a core kind of understanding of mine at Hopium that, there are tens of thousands of Democratic elected officials in the country. We have to use all the tools in our toolbox to force this debate, as our founders did, down to every local community about what Republicans are doing to them. And I think that we've been more successful at that than I think is sort of the conventional wisdom based on what happened with the big ugly bill and the focus on that. But now we have to do a broader condemnation of everything that Trump's doing. I don't know what the right exact message is going to be. We're going to figure this out trial by error. We're going to engage the public. But I think we're now free again to engage him on his broader economic agenda, on the tariffs, not just on the Medicaid cuts, right? But on his assault on healthcare, on the escalation, the roiding up, as I call it, of ICE and the stealing of our civil liberties. People are not into what's going on with ICE and this masking stuff because they feel that if it could happen to those people, it could happen to them, right? There's no line here. We know they're out of control and they're being crazy. So I'm a little bit more optimistic today. Optimistic, not certain, not, is that we have, that he is weaker than he. I still, as I talked to Tara McGowan today, I still remain shocked with how far his poll numbers have come down. I'm still surprised by it. It's a big deal. He's in a very weakened state. He's in some of the polls, he's where Biden was when Biden decided to get out of the race a year ago, right? Like in a place that was considered to be fatal for Joe Biden. Trump in some of these polls is in a similar place to that already, right? Before many of the bad things that he's doing are going to kick in. And so I'll just end up by saying that that I think that our job is to every day we possibly can to not allow the false narrative of him being strong and powerful and winning and succeeding to go unchallenged. I have committed, this is a learning that I had from the 2022 election and the red wave when I got the election right, when virtually everybody else got it wrong, was that I became aware of how much their narratives and their stories wind their way through the media ecosystem, the ambience of information, the stuff we talk about with Tara McGowan today, and how difficult it is to get ours in there, right? We're outmatched in the day to day of moving our narratives and stories through through the information ecosystem, which is why the fact that we have been so successful at it in the last few months is kind of something that I'm still kind of trying to come to understand about what happened and what it means. And it means that I think a few things. I think it means that Trump is going to spend an unbelievable amount of money very soon on television in the battleground states and districts trying to repair the damage that's been done to his brand and to win this argument about the big ugly and the rest of his agenda. I think it also means for us that, we've had some wins here and we have to build on the wins and continue to fight in this information space to help define his agenda and to get it to, as Tara McGowan talked about today, to people who are passive news consumers, people who are disinterested. And as Tara and I discussed today, because she talked about the struggle that Democrats are having about reaching disinterested and passive news consumers, and I reminded her that those low information voters are the ones that have abandoned Trump, or low political information voters are the ones who have abandoned Trump the most. And so the vibe they're getting about him is negative, which means that we have to go on offense and we have to be unbelievably aggressive. We have to enter into this information space. We have to, I'm going to be coming out with some new recommendations tomorrow in Hopium about calls and contacts we can be making to our senators and House members and other political leaders, given the current environment that we're in right now. And we have to keep that up. I think I'm so proud of all of you who've been doing that. I can't tell you how important that is. It's a new muscle that we've developed. We need 20 new muscles, but this is certainly one that has been really important. And some of those things are the rolling back of the tariffs, the moving of the Russia sanctions that I think we need to move. There's going to be new things that we can do, new areas of opportunity for us to engage in places that he's weak and where we can take advantage of that. And then finally, I'll just say that obviously the other piece of this is that we have elections in November. And, we need to go win them by the biggest margins we possibly can. And all of you, either through Hopium or through other places, should be making contributions to Spanberger and to Cheryl. Many of you will be supporting Mom Donnie, right? I want to make sure I say it right. I need to go practice it for a few hours. The sounds are a little bit complicated, right? But Mom Donnie, and that also what we're doing at Hopium is we're also raising money and working for some of the House and Senate candidates that we need to get into stronger shape this year to make it more likely that they win next year. And we'll be having more on that in the coming weeks. We're not waiting to the fall. I'm going to be announcing more endorsements of people. But for those of you who are watching this and aren't part of the Hopium community, if you go to our site, I make recommendations every day of the places where you can volunteer and put your money that I think are the highest and best use of what we're doing together, and places that are kind of the no-brainers where we need to go now, and to make this fall election the best that it can be, because we can't wait for 16 months, right? We need to use his playbook, which is we need wins. We need to be successful. We need to be strong. We need to be, putting points on the board. We can't wait for 16 months. It's crazy. And I will just end with one last thing that I think that has not gotten enough attention, and I've talked to the Senate Democrats about this. When you're trying to assess the strength and efficacy of our leadership right now, and I know there's a lot of discontent in the family, I'm not surprised. This is a terrible moment and bad things are happening. I want to remind everybody that one of the biggest successes we've had this year is the parliamentarian knocking out in the Senate a huge number of really bad things that got knocked out of the big ugly bill. And I just want everyone to realize how that process worked. She didn't look at it and just pulled stuff out. There were Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans went in front of her and had debates about what could stand and what could got knocked out. So those things that were knocked out by the Senate Democrats. They weren't knocked out by the parliamentarian. And I think that this is another win that we have to give ourselves, right? In this time that winning becomes contagious, right? You got to get another win, take the wins when they come, keep building on them. And we did have a big win, right? Even though his bill passed, it was really unpopular, and his numbers have come down, at least in the early polling since it passed. That's incredible that that happened. It's incredible that the country turned on him on the ICE escalation. It's incredible that the country turned on him on the bombing of Iran, right? We should be sanguine that the country, that a majority of the country has kind of said, like, I'm not into this. This isn't okay. It's not going as I expected. And so it should give us fuel that when we go out and fight over the next few months, and we have to fight with everything we got every day, that we can achieve victories because we have had some, and we need to celebrate them and understand them, but to also recognize that this is going to be brutal and hard. And I think they have made enormous mistakes. I think that Trump believes, and I'll wrap up with this, that Trump believes that he can do anything he wants, no matter how terrible it is for the country or for the people of this country or for his own voters. And they won't know because he has the power to sell anything to them. And this arrogance and this delusional sense of his own power is the thing that I think is beginning to take him down. And for historians like Ruth Ben-Ghiat and others who've studied fascism and authoritarianism, it is often the case that these leaders get so detached from the day to day that they sow the seeds of their own destruction through their delusions in the way that, you know, Putin told the world that he was going to be in Kyiv in 3 days, right? And that was 3 years ago. And sorry for the camera, I don't know what's happening here. And so, I think we're seeing the seeds of his own destruction. They went too far with the big ugly bill. They're going too far on the tariffs. They are, the ICE escalation is too much. The country's rejecting it. His ridiculous gamesmanship around the Iran bombing. People see him for what he is, which is that he's a fucking clown, right? And he's the worst person that has ever, the worst American in all of our history. And the gravity of all this is settling in, I think, to a majority. And again, we're only operating with that 60%. We're not going to touch the 40 percent. Maybe we can get into the high 30s, right, with him and get into the low, get him into the low 30s. He's never going to drop below 38, 37% in my view. It's just never going to happen. We have a lot to work with for the rest of the country. So hearten, chins up, everybody. Let's go to work. Let's keep doing our thing. It was a tough week last week, but the president, Donald Trump has had a bad week this week. Things aren't going the way that he wants. The sky isn't red, it's blue, and we have to keep fighting as hard as we can. So thanks for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. And let me see what Lincoln's got. Yeah, I, I now realize I had a whole part of my rap here that I can see in my notes that I did before I came on here. Yeah, I think this debate, and again, this is the first time I kind of did this rap, so bear with me if I didn't totally, nail it. Is that um, Texas and the tragedy of Texas. I think the debate about the harms of his agenda began this week. This was another thing that sort of ruined his victory lap week, and I can't believe I left it out. It's the number one thing here in my notes here. I have terrible handwriting, so I can't even read my own handwriting, by the way. And so Texas is a big problem for him because, as I said, this idea that that are just leaving people on their own and they're walking away from responsibilities the federal government has had for generations or even all of our history is that issue of him having this contemptuous view of the American people, this eugenicist kind of understanding of the country where everyone's on their own, and if you can't make it, it's because you're weak and not because you're strong, right? Which is the sort of Robert Kennedy view of the world, is that view is not going to, he can't sell that view to the American people. He just can't sell it to us. And because I don't think that people feel that our government should abandon us to, floods like this that happen that kills these young girls in a camp, right? I mean, my daughter went to a camp in Maryland, very similar to this one, on the banks of a river, right? And with people living in shacks and so on, all the things. And I've been thinking, she went to it for 8 years, and I've been thinking about this all week, that my daughter went to a camp just like this, right? And for them to have had this happen, it's just sort of an unimaginable thing. And it's Donald Trump's fault that this happened. We just have to be clear, right? I mean, it's his fault this happened. It's his fault that there are ground stops and delays that are happening all over the country that are disrupting the operations of our planes and people getting to various places, right? It's his fault that millions and millions of people are going to die because of the canceling of USAID. It's his fault that hundreds of thousands of Americans are going to die because of his cutting people off of health insurance and kicking people out of old age homes, right, and retirement homes, nursing homes, I mean. And it's his fault. It's his fault that prices have gone up. It's his fault that the deficit's going to go through the roof. All of this stuff is his fault. And I because these are happened because of choices he made. And this is what I mean. This decision to say fuck you all, the line I've been using in more polite terms is that more for me and less for all of you, or let them eat cake, that this strategy that they're actually really employing, right? I mean, this is actually really what they're doing here. I mean, the most hostile, contemptuous strategy to an extraordinary betrayal of the American people. They can't defend this stuff. And so they're going to have to defend it in the budget that's coming up in October, the cuts to NOAA and all the other things. They just basically, as apparently, are in the process of eliminating NASA, as of today, right? They're going to have to defend this stuff to the public in the coming months, but they're also going to have to defend it in the states. And part of what I was saying earlier was that every Democratic elected now has the opportunity to create debate in their communities about the abandonment of their communities by the federal government and Trump, and this hostile turn that he's taken towards their interests and their ability to live the lives that they all want to live. There's incredible hostility towards the aspirations and dreams of the American people now playing out all across the country. And whether we have majorities or not, right, we can force debate around these things that are being done and the abandonment of the American people by Trump. And it's why I will just tell you, as a political professional, what I feel like is that we have a lot to work with here. And it may be under unbelievably difficult circumstances. But I think the fact now that the big ugly has passed, it's now allowing us to sort of remove the discipline we had of focusing only on the things in the big ugly, and to now expand it out to this broader agenda of hostility towards working people and the American people, which makes which gives us more richness and fullness in which to have this debate. It gives us more avenues to engage the public. We're not just talking about Medicaid any longer. We're talking about all of it. And I think this is why I have gotten myself tonight, and maybe I'm delusional in my own thinking about this, that as people who I've been in the narrative wars of the Democratic Party for the last 33 years, I think we're in a very strong position right now, and we have to operate as if that is true. We have to be operating from a place of strength and going on offense, and not in being in a defensive crouch. And, I did this interview with Greg Sargent this week that was on the New Republic podcast. And one of the things we talked about is that, Democrats have been in an incredibly defensive crouch around immigration, the border, and even what's happened with ICE. I think we've come out of the box really slow and tentative on what's going on here. And I think that's going to end now. I think now, they've overreached so much that I think it's going to pull the Democrats out of their place of sort of worry and confusion around immigration to a place where, we're defending the rights and liberties of everyday people and due process and all these things. We have to be on the right side of all this. And I've worked on immigration a lot. We've got one of the most important immigration experts in the country coming to speak to us Friday at 2:15, David Leopold, my dear friend. We went through the immigration wars together in the Obama years. We've written articles together. He's a remarkable guy, practicing immigration attorney. He's going to be able to talk about this stuff from the front lines. Friday, 2:15 live. If you can make it, it'll be sent out Saturday morning for all of you who want it. But you're going to see Hopium going even deeper into this immigration debate than we've had. We've had a lot of events around it. There's been a lot of commentary here, but this is an area that I've worked on for 20 years. I know my way around these issues, and we're going to be playing a much more aggressive role in this, in creating a counter to the unbelievable danger of what is already and is will become with all these additional resources they have. This is an incredible threat to our liberties and our freedom. And we're going to have to fight in new and creative ways to prevent, I think, from what Trump in his delusional fantasy, right, of invading cities and putting down all the bad people in his mind and people, forcing us to bend the knee because he's got a Marine, with a rifle pointed at our head. We're going to have to, fight this stuff in new and creative ways. And I still, again, I am more optimistic about us prevailing on these things today than I was, I think, over the last few weeks. But it's going to require courage and fortitude and from all of us, and pure patriotism here, right? Love of country guiding us through this next path where where failure is not an option and then victory is what we have to strive for. Let me go to additional questions. Lincoln's been great about summarizing sort of the main themes here tonight. Um, yeah, I mean, the measles questions come up around measles. This is all about the abandonment. It's all part of the same themes that we're talking about, the assault on public health. We just did this great event with Charles Gaba about this broad assault on public health. I think one of the most interesting things that's going to happen this fall is what happens with universities and schools and everyone who went through the pandemic. I mean, we are very close to being in a health emergency in the United States because of measles. We don't really know how strong the vaccines are going to be of older people, for example. I mean, I need to go get a booster because of when I was born and so on. I haven't done it yet. But we're about to test the efficacy of the vaccine of aging vaccines and test the efficacy of the measles vaccine in ways that it was never really intended to be tested, right? With potentially multiple contacts over time and so on. And because measles is now everywhere in the country. And it is far deadlier than and more debilitating than COVID. And the idea that there's no discussion about this happening from the federal government, this is all somehow okay, because they have a eugenicist kind of view, which is that if you get it and die, then you probably shouldn't have been living in the first place. And it's incredible for me to say this, but I now have come to believe that that's actually driving this anti-vax sentiment is that there isn't, that if you get something like measles or COVID and you don't live, then you were not supposed to live anyway, and that we can cull the population and get the weak and allow the strong to prosper. It's pure utter fascism, right? Like it's like literally textbook fascism. And I don't think the public's going to buy into this, which is why, again, we've limited our debate over the last few months. We've narrowed down our area of engagement to just what was in the big ugly. Now we are liberated to I think, go attack this thing and I don't think we have the right narratives yet. I've threw out some stuff tonight and threw out some stuff in my writing, but I think, this is an area where we've got to escalate and raise our game up to really help talk to the American people about the grave threats and the kind of politics that's emerged here, where there's a handful of very wealthy people who are taking care of themselves and they've gone behind they're in their gated community and they think and they're up on top of the hill and they think all the people down in the town and outside the gated community, they don't really give a shit what happens to them, right? And that's just not who America is. That's not who we are, and we're going to have to fight this, with everything we got. The haves and the have yachts and the have nots. That was cute. Um, the Let me just go into some of the questions here and see if there's things that I have not covered. Um, Yeah, I think there are a bunch of questions here in general about physical protests outside the Supreme Court, HHS. I think all of this, yes, right? We need to be doing more. And I know that some of the protests and rallies that we've done have been these big national days, but all of you know that some of the most important protests and rallies that we did were these smaller ones, the Tesla takedowns that had a huge impact on Elon Musk and even Trump. I mean, I think Trump saw that stuff and it affected them. And I don't know that we need. I think that the fire has been lit around public gatherings. Indivisible deserves a lot of credit for having really helped give people the courage to go out in public. But as you all of you know, a lot of this stuff has been locally organized. There isn't really a heavy hand driving all this. And I hope what happens is that there is increased creativity that, I would like to be involved. I've talked about this and I just don't have the bandwidth here. I've got Lincoln. That's it. That's all of Hopium, the two of us, right? And all of you. But I do think there should be regular protests outside of HHS, for example, over what they're doing. And I think whether it's Supreme Court, HHS, yes, I think in the streets, and I want to be very clear about this, is that I don't ascribe to this theory that we get to 3.5% and then everything magical is going to be okay. I don't buy into that. And I think frankly, this is a little bit of fool's gold inside the family right now. In the sense that, and I know I'm speaking a little bit heretically to some of the thinking inside the family, is that I think that these protests are just one tactic, right? We have all these other things we have to do. We have to win elections. We have to build up our state parties. We have to be in the information war every day, right? We have to call our Congress people. We have to do all of it. We have to do all of it. There's no one silver bullet here. There's no one magic thing that's going to do it. I mean, when the Syrian government fell, in the last year, after years and years of the rebellion that had been going on, you never know when these things are going to tumble, and you have to do everything. And that's why when I get asked, like, what's the most important thing we can do? It's the things that you feel most comfortable doing that you'll do more of it. If you want to organize Tesla, the equivalent of Tesla takedowns outside of congressional offices of the Republicans, awesome, right? If you want to write more postcards, that's great too, right? If you want to do what a lot of people in the Hopium community are doing, which is getting up every day and calling their elected leaders, and letting them know what's required of them now and what people think, that's really amazing too. I mean, I will say that I hope that here in this community, that this community becomes that one of the things that happens here is that everybody calls their House and Senate members as often as they possibly can. 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. I cannot tell you how important it is that they hear from you. And because also they know when they don't hear from you. And one of the things I want to work on this week is the Russia sanctions bill. I'll be writing about this tomorrow. All of you are, I want to get you uh, up to speed on what's happening with the bill, and I hope this becomes an area of engagement with us. Yeah, call your electeds. If you call your electeds twice, call them about one thing, and then call them back in the afternoon about, something else, right? And the uh, and that's what we have to do, and so on. So let me go into some other. Um, so Sharon asked about the issue of the big ugly coming back. Well, let me just explain the budgetary process, right? So the reconciliation bill is this kind of special thing under special rules that had limits in what it could actually do. And it allocated money, but it didn't appropriate money, right? It sort of said like ICE is going to get 40 billion for detention centers. Now what has to happen is that the appropriations process has to happen where the government every year getting ready for the next fiscal year, which begins October 1st of 20, the fiscal year 2026 begins October 1st, 2025. Um, that usually Congress, when Congress is operating properly, creates very detailed appropriations that they pass that dictates to the federal government, the executive branch, what they're spending their money on. And this is a process that is cooperative, right? Historically, the executive branch has things it wants and Congress has things it wants, but they then get into enormous detail about programs and how money is spent. They just don't say, hey, DHS, you get 40 billion bucks, have a good day, spend it any way you want. The stuff is prescribed. And one of the things that Trump has been doing is that they've been ignoring all that. And when Congress passes the budget, it's law. Trump has been breaking the law by just stopping funding and cutting stuff without Congress's approval. But now Congress has to take all of these things that Trump has done, right? All the stuff in the reconciliation bill, all the cuts to NOAA and FAA and NIH and all this stuff, and they now need to put it into law and into a budget. And they have to translate all of this stuff, which means they have to vote on it. And they actually have to vote on it in committee. And they actually have to go through and make the cuts to NIH, right? And start getting specific about what's going to get cut and what isn't. They're running into problems now doing this because they've moved now from this notion, this place of notion, this is notional to specific. And one of the things that we discussed with Charles Gaba this week is that there's this meme in the family that, all the worst cuts of BBB are going to happen after the election, and they've kind of avoided, taking the heat. That's not really true. And Charles, if you haven't watched the interview with Charles, yes, the big Medicaid cuts, most of them are coming in 2027 and 2028, so they won't be in this fiscal year, for example. But the huge cuts to ACA subsidies are going to be in this bill that just passed. And so they're going to have to vote on denying health insurance or in raising the prices. I mean, the estimate is that the cutting of these ACA subsidies that are going to kick in at the end of this year are going to raise the prices of premiums by Charles was saying it could be as many as 45 or 50 million people in the next few months, right? This is going to happen. And they're going to have to vote on this. And they're going to have to defend this in committee and in debate and in as we walk through the budgetary process. And so, they're going to have to go, and they're not going to have to debate the big Medicaid cuts, but they're going to have to debate all this other stuff. How are they going to justify the cutting of the National Weather Service after what just happened? And so we've been given an opportunity now to have another bite at the apple, in essence, both at the federal level with Congress having these debates and back home, where there should be pressure on Republican governors to fight harder to fight the abandonment of their communities, right? I mean, Democratic elected officials, people running for office, right, are going to have the ability to talk about what it means that the National Weather Service can't necessarily accurately forecast the kind of things that happen in Texas any longer because of these cuts. What does that mean for us here in Colorado, in Arizona, in Michigan, whatever, right? Like this broad sense that the government is abandoning the American people they're weakening the vaccine regimes. They're doing all this stuff that's going to do material harm to communities across the country. Well, all of your local Democratic elected officials, you should be calling them and encouraging them to have hearings and debates and discussions about these things now, the way that we're encouraging people to have these discussions around the resolutions of condemnation of Trump for the abandonment of the constitutional order. We have more agency here than we understand, right? We have tens of thousands of elected Democrats, and every one of them should be in this debate, no matter where they are. And all of you should be demanding that they be in this debate, regardless of what position they hold. Every city council, every county council, every state legislature can have hearings or discussions about this, or at least there can be an effort to force debate that gets then pushed back by the Republicans. They can hold shadow hearings in state legislatures that are controlled by Republicans the way that Congress did, right? Because this abandonment of the country, of states and localities by the federal government, is going to be a brutal issue for every state and local government in the country, who all of a sudden are going to have a lot less money, a lot less capacity. What does it mean that we're not going to have FEMA any longer, right? Who's going to do the emergency response? Texas doesn't have the ability to do what FEMA did. It means that Abbott and these guys are going to have some debate. Otherwise, they're just leaving. They're going to, they could end up destroying the economy of Texas. The stakes of this stuff are so high, and the opportunities that we have, because what Trump is doing is so fucking insane and dangerous and scary that, shame on us if we can't wrap this stuff around their neck, right? In the coming months, both at the federal level, but all of you should be pushing and mobilizing your state parties, your indivisible groups, all these networks that you're part of to have your state and local officials really start to engage because the bill's passed now. It's coming, right? Like we know it's coming. It's ugly. We know they're going to fight to maintain the cuts to these basic services that the federal government's been responsible for generations. We know that they're evaporating the vaccine regime in the United States and that our kids are being exposed to more diseases than they've have been in 50, 60 years, right? This stuff is not okay. And there, we have more tools to fight this than I think we understand, but it requires courage, patriotism, creativity, and courage is contagious. And so all of you in your home districts can be doing what we've been doing to federal electeds, which is helping them understand of what's required of them now. And I hope that sets a little bit more clarity on what I'm saying here. And I didn't really know this until the last couple of days. I've talked to a couple of members of Congress in the last few days. I've discussed this, and everyone is sort of waking up to the idea that, yeah, man, we've got like from a rhetorical narrative, comms, info war kind of arena, we have this ability now to go on offense and do some really meaningful things that we need to do. Yes, so we want our local governments to tell us what they're planning to do in response. Yes, they need to. I mean, all of a sudden, I mean, I don't know if people understand what's going to start happening, but we've already started seeing, hospitals go out of business. Health doctors and clinics are going to start downsizing and right sizing already. There is going to be all of a sudden, there are going to be all these responsibilities fostered onto local communities with no transition plan that it could cost incredible amounts of money. Or they're just going to see a lot of people in their community die, like what just happened in Texas, right? And so I don't think communities, I think these elected leaders, I mean, what was interesting, I watched a little bit of a press conference today of Kerr County elected official who debated whether or not to install warning sirens, and they turned it down because they were too expensive. And he was asked in this press conference, right? This is a Trumpian Republican guy. Why did you do that? And he says, I want to talk about the future, not the past. Yeah, good luck with that, brother. Good luck with that one, right? Like you could have installed warning systems that would have saved all these people's lives last year, and you voted not to do it because it was too expensive. Yeah, I mean, go defend that one, brother, right? And so this is what I mean. Like we have to have more faith and confidence the American people are behind us, and we have to go and be incredibly aggressive in how we conduct this in the coming months. Let me go to other questions here. Great questions tonight, by the way. Thank you. Um, I mean, there have been a bunch of questions about Ukraine. Does anyone understand what our position of the United States government is towards Ukraine right now, or who's in charge or who's running it? I mean, it's why I want to really push the Russian sanctions bill, which is to put pressure on Trump to end up going into the right place. I can't I follow this stuff very closely. I talk to people that are involved in this in Congress. And I spoke to a major member of Congress yesterday who's involved in this, and he says they absolutely have no idea what's happening. There's no information coming from the White House or the administration towards them. They didn't know the weapon systems were canceled. They didn't know that they have no idea what's happening. Nobody has any idea what's happening. It is a level of chaos about something that is existential for the United States that is just staggering in the way that the tariffs and what he's doing with tariffs is staggeringly dangerous. And this is going to be another meme that we're going to be developing here is that Trump is really putting this country in danger in so many ways. And we are less safe today than we've been in 200 years, since the sacking of Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812, right? Like we are we are in the shitter here and we've got to make this. This is what I mean. Like we couldn't engage in these issues because of the big ugly and the discipline around the big ugly. Now we can go start attacking him on many, many fronts. Many of you heard me earlier this year talk about the need to open up a second front, a third front, a fourth front. When you fight in a military battle, you don't only fight in one place, right? You try to weaken the enemy by opening up the areas of engagement. And we now need to do that. And I think we can. Um, we're getting to end of time and let me just finish by saying the I think, I, you know, I never know how I'm going to feel when I come into these things, and I have to admit, in the preparation tonight, and this is the first time I've given this talk, and also just frankly from the talks that we've had with Charles and with Greg and Tara, and we're interviewing Phil Weiser tomorrow, the Attorney General of Colorado, who's going to give us an update on the work of the Attorney Generals, and we've got David Leopold. I think that Trump is not, I think to conclude, Trump is failing, he's not succeeding, he's losing, he's not winning, he's weak, he's not strong, he's a big blubbery baby man, not a strong man. And it is our responsibility to litigate that every day because it is the area of most significant engagement for all of us. Our politics today, to a great degree, isn't about a single issue. It's about whether he's strong, winning, succeeding, or whether he's failing, a loser, and weak. And we have been ignorant about this area of engagement as Democrats. I've talked about this, that I tried to get the Harris campaign to be more cognizant of the need to be strong. And she came out of that first debate strong. She was leading in the polls. We were raising tons of money. And then they said that she was the underdog. And they made her weak rather than making her strong. And I think we have to get much smarter about this idea that the central area of engagement with Trump is around strong and weak, winning and losing, succeeding and failing. And we need to contest this space the way that we contest Medicaid and healthcare and the economy and tariffs. We have to contest the strong, weak space. This is why I spend so much time talking about polling. Because in Washington, right, what took Biden down and prevented him from running for reelection a year ago was his poll numbers in the sense that he was weak and that he couldn't actually win the election. In this city, strength and weakness to a great degree is still determined by job approval and poll numbers. And what's happened is that because they've now created their own fake polling, which I've been writing about for 3 years, right, is that they have been able to create a mirage, a false story of his winning and being strong in their information ecosystem. So in their information ecosystem, he's young and handsome and thin and virile, and isn't wearing unbelievable amounts of makeup and doesn't have a girdle that's working overtime and all the things that he isn't. They've invented this fake version of him that's keeping them in check. If we can take that version of Trump away, which is that in fact he is the old man behind the curtain. He is not wearing any clothes, and that's an ugly thing to think about, right? That he is weak and not strong, that he's losing and not winning, that he's failing and not succeeding, then all that's left is the ugliest thing that we've all ever seen. All he has is this perception of strength. And we have to engage in that part of this debate in the way that we debate, we engage around traditional issues. That's part of my big message to all of you, which is why I spend so much time looking at polling. I will conclude tonight by saying that I still am shocked how quickly and how many Americans have buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse takes a while. You invest in something, you don't run away from it, right? But we've seen 15 to 25% of the people that voted for Donald Trump are unhappy with what his presidency. That's a big number this quickly. So it should give us hope that he doesn't have as much control over the information environment that we think he does every day. It should give us hope that we have more agency and power than we understand if we organize ourselves properly and make the right arguments against him. It gives me hope that the future of my kids and my grandkids are not going to be as damaged as I think they are right now. It gives me hope that we're going to win and not lose, but only if we go fight as hard as we possibly can. Love you guys. Have a great night. And remember, like, subscribe, and share. If you've enjoyed this presentation, please like it, share it with others. And if you're not a subscriber to Hopium or to our YouTube channel, where this also gets distributed, please do and invite all of your friends to join you. Take care, everyone.